Hey, my name is Justin Daniel, and welcome to the Young Pastors Podcast, providing resources for young pastors. One of the things that was most surprising to me when I first got into ministry was there was a lot of things that took place that I never ever thought would take place becoming a pastor. There was a lot of things that if I could go back and tell myself now, it would have been good to know. There was a great video that Together for the Gospel put out where Mark Dever, he walks through this conversation. What I want to do is I just want to take a minute and I just want to take a look at this video together. I think it's got some really, really great insight for those of us who are still in ministry, but not only that, but a great reminder for those of us who are younger in ministry as well. So let's check this out real quick.
So one of the questions I most often get from people going into ministry is, if I could look back, 10 or 15 years when I got into the ministry, what is one thing that I wish that I'd known or wish that somebody told me? I can usually think of a couple dozen, but I know that we probably have 2 or 3 that really stand out. So,
yeah, I think for me, it's as I go on in the ministry, is to realize how big a deal it is for Satan and his attack on me to bring me to a state of discouragement. He'll use my sin, other people's sin, unmet expectations to get me discouraged, and that is incredibly debilitating.
If I was to tell
Yeah, one of the things that still to this day that I battle with is discouragement. And coming into the ministry, that's something that I did not expect. You kind of come into it kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed a little bit. I mean, even if you've interned and done some things in some churches, your whole goal is, man, if I one day become the lead pastor somewhere, things will be different, things will change. And I can tell you that, man, there are just things that just floor me when it comes to the way in which certain people respond, the way in which certain people act. When things don't work out the way in which you would hope them to work out. One of the things that I think surprised me the most as a young pastor was to realize how hurtful the church can be in general. You expect it from outside the walls, but a lot of times when it comes to you putting in your best effort, you loving and caring for people, you ministering, you doing your very best, and even when it comes to your own personal walk with the Lord, sometimes people within the church, they can just be mean and it can be hurtful, and as a result, there's just discouragement. And I think sometimes what we forget is that the Lord has called us to minister to those kinds of people. What I think is so interesting is a lot of times we're surprised when I heard a pastor once say that sheep bite and it hurts. When sheep bite, we're called to shepherd God's flock and ultimately submit to the ultimate shepherd, which is Jesus Christ. But man, it hurts when we're called to minister to people who, man, that they battle, they struggle with different things. And when you start offering certain things like accountability, how people can lash out, and that creates discouragement. And so that's a part of the game. When you are a pastor, you battle with discouragement. But I think a great point that's being pointed out here is that, man, it's a tactic of the enemy. And so to remind ourselves that when we find ourselves discouraged, it doesn't necessarily mean that we've done anything wrong. It means that we have an enemy who's trying to take us out of the game. Let's keep watching.
a guy who's young, he's 21 right now. I remember being there. I remember wanting to change the world. That was everything to me. The world was going to change as a result of my engagement with the gospel. And what God has really done is he just plants you in one little place. He keeps you out of the way, and he wants you to work there for a long time. And that's what I wish I would have known, is the longevity of faithful service is the way God prepares us to do the work.
Wow.
And there's no shortcut. I've never forgotten it. It's been a great help to me over the years.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Woo. Man, when it comes to that point alone, the longevity of faithful service, man, that is so significant. I think sometimes we get into ministry thinking that we're going to come in and we're going to change the world. We're getting into ministry because, man, as a result of the works that God has allowed me to do, there's going to be so many people that are impacted by it. And realistically, we spend a lot of time in training. We spend a lot of time doing things that we don't necessarily want to do. I felt like a lot of the times that I was early on in ministry, there was a lot of grunt work. I remember even like feeling like I was a decent Bible teacher and then falling up underneath another pastor and that pastor saying, nope, you're going to do it my way. And I just remember getting so frustrated because I'm like, you're really crippling me. You're stifling me. And the whole time that was the Lord developing certain characteristics in me. And there's a lot to be said for putting in our dues to a certain extent, to find ourselves in submission to other authorities around us, to do things that we don't necessarily want to do or not, that are not exactly easy for us to do. And it's a lot like a Moses in the wilderness experience, where those particular things, they prep us for the ministry that God has for us down the road. The beautiful thing is He allows us to do ministry right in the moment while He's also equipping us. And so, when we find ourselves in circumstances where, man, it's just not our cup of tea, it's not the way in which we would do it, it's not the way in which we want it done, know that those are moments where the Lord is sanctifying us as well. Know that man, those are building block moments where the Lord is training us and adding things to our tool belt that we can later use. I can't tell you how much I have changed over the years, how my convictions have maintained and stayed the same, but the way in which I apply things, the practical nature to ministry, man, how that has shifted within me. And so I just, I want to encourage you that if you find yourself in a situation where you hate doing something a certain way, if it's not sinful and if it's not abusive in any particular way, it could be the Lord stretching you. And so, man, realize that you have not arrived yet. I still have not arrived, but know that the Lord is still working within you, and that's part of the ministry journey. Let's check out what JD Greer has to say.
I am kind of maybe tagging along with that. I wish I had understood. Maybe they tried to explain it to me, but I just didn't get it. How ministry, pulpit ministry, exacerbates the idols of the approval of men and the flesh. And I just realized that ministry is a great place for guys with the idol of success to hide and then to feed that in the name of the flesh. Go ahead.
There's a great value when you.
Let's stop there for a second, man. That is so true. That is so true. When it comes to a lot of times, even having a false sense of humility, it's one of those things that when it comes to preaching and teaching, it has the ability to feed an ego, and we need to be reminded that, man, we are there for an audience of one. We are there for the Lord. Man, that is always a good reminder. Let's keep watching.
When you think you're consciously competent, to all of a sudden get those moments of clarity where you're not. And
Oh my, yes. If you haven't experienced this yet, you will. Man, there are moments in ministry where you feel like you know what's going on. You feel like, man, I can do this. And then all of a sudden you realize, man, I just don't. This is beyond me. And these things are always good. These moments are always good because this is another growing moment where we as ministers or we as pastors are leaning upon the Lord in a new way. That when it comes to ministry, that we are constantly learning from the Lord. We are constantly learning from His Word, and we are constantly learning from the circumstances that He puts us in. Let's keep watching.
And then just go build from there again. Otherwise, you're in trouble. Think of Jesus' words to Peter 3 times. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Our love of Christ, according to the Word of Christ, will be evidenced in our giving ourselves to our people. Tend my sheep, feed my lambs. So you're young, you want to love Christ, you want to change the world, give your heart to His people. I need to remind myself of that every day. People are not.
Man, I tell you, I've worked in a couple different environments when it comes to being a pastor. I've worked in some very traditional environments. where organization isn't necessarily a high priority, but preaching the word is a very high priority, and in which it should be. But what I've also realized is that when you preach the word and yet you do not have organization alongside of it, organization is a way in which we show what we love people. It shows that, hey, in order to help people to grow in their relationship with the Lord, it helps to have processes. It helps to have things in place so that we know that we are doing what we have claimed that we are doing. It's one thing to claim that we're doing something; it's a whole nother thing to actually prove that we're doing it. And systems and processes help with that. But I've also worked in larger churches where it's almost like the systems and processes, we default to those things so that we don't necessarily have to deal with people. We herd people like cattle more so than sheep. And what I love about this is constantly reminding ourselves that, you know what, ministry is about people. There can be rules to ministry, our ministries, right? But you know what? There always needs to be room for exception to those rules. I wouldn't go for, and I'm specifically talking about setting particular standards and working within the boundaries of particular ministries. A lot of times if we just let the people run free and do whatever they want, what ends up happening is there is no growth. There actually becomes a lot of selfishness, and divisiveness is kind of a result of that. So there has to be a level of structure. There has to be a level of intentionality behind it. But sometimes you can overcorrect it, overstructure to where ministry is no longer about the people. It becomes about the agenda of the church. And reminding ourselves that, man, these systems, these processes, these things that we do, man, is about loving and caring for God's people. Man, that's so good. Let's keep listening.
Not always what they appear to be. I wish I had known that. On the positive and the negative. Over now decades of ministry, people that you don't think God's going to get a lot done through in your congregation become the pillars that hold up the church. And there's an element where you think, wow, that's where all the change is going to happen, and it doesn't occur. So you just got to remember that. Love the people, give yourself to the people. They're not always who you think they are. But
Yeah. That's 100% true. It's amazing how, when it comes to ministry, we think that there are certain people that are going to be just rock stars and help, and sometimes those are the people that fight against maybe some of the things that you feel like the Lord's calling us to do within the local church. And then, man, the unsuspecting person that you would never ever think would be involved in certain things is perhaps what the person that God will use to bring about maybe change in a particular environment. And I think that's so important for us to realize. Never be surprised by God's people. I think that, like I said earlier, I really do think that the most shocking thing for me when it came to stepping into ministry and spending time within ministry is realizing that I had this idealistic perspective of what should happen. And then all of a sudden I realized that, man, these are the people that God has allowed me to minister to, and they did not align. And what we have to understand is that ministry is what happens between here and here. And we often think that, well, no, ministry is what happens here. No, it's about equipping the saints for the work of the ministry.